They thought their betrayal would crush you, but you already felt the cracks forming before it happened. The late replies, the sudden coldness, the way their tone shifted. It was all building up to the moment they left or lied. Most people ignore these little signs because the heart wants to believe in a fairy tale. You, however, are done pretending. Anticipation means you stop waiting to be blindsided. You pay attention. You notice the change in energy, the hidden smirk when they think you did not catch their insult, the way they talk about loyalty but never live it. This is not paranoia, it is awareness. Once you anticipate the next move, you are no longer a victim. They can only shock you if you are asleep. You are awake now. And when you are awake, their cruelty loses its sting. Toxic people survive on your surprise. They want you caught off guard, stumbling, questioning yourself. That is their weapon. But once you expect their tricks, you strip them of power. If you know the guilt trip is coming, you stop defending yourself. If you know they will raise their voice, you stop shaking when they do. If you know they will go silent to punish you, you refuse to chase. This is the scary part for them. You stop playing their game. They realize their power was never real, it only existed because you reacted. Now that you anticipate, you are untouchable. They shout and you stay calm. They lie, and you already knew the truth. They betray, and you already prepared your heart. Their moves look childish when you stop being shocked by them. That is how anticipation breaks the cycle. Relationships often fail because people want fantasy more than truth. You wanted them to love you, so you ignored the signs that they did not. You wanted them to change, so you excused behavior that kept repeating. Anticipation does not mean you stop loving. It means you love with eyes open. If they cross your boundary once, expect them to test it again. If they make promises and never keep them, expect more of the same. Stop acting surprised when someone shows you exactly who they are. The pain comes less from their actions and more from your refusal to believe them. Anticipation gives you freedom. You stop asking, why would they do this? And start answering it with clarity, because this is who they are. That shift is the end of confusion. Once confusion dies, peace arrives. The pain of betrayal feels like fire because it mixes shock with heartbreak. If you had expected it, it would have hurt, but it would not have destroyed you. That is the difference anticipation makes. Pain is part of life. Shock is optional. When you start anticipating the worst from people who already showed their colors, you stop letting them rip your heart out again and again. You may still feel sadness, but you will not collapse. You will not lose yourself. They wanted you broken, but you walked away with composure. That composure is scarier than revenge. It shows them their cruelty failed. You survived. More than that, you expected it. You knew their move before they played it, and you refused to fall. That is what haunts them more than anything. Being stuck in life often comes from reacting instead of anticipating. You wait for others to choose before you act. You wait for opportunities instead of creating them. You wait for people to respect you instead of demanding it with your actions. Anticipation changes that. You see that people will doubt you, so you prepare your confidence before they open their mouths. You know failure will come, so you build strength before it arrives. You sense betrayal will happen, so you guard your heart without hardening it. This mindset flips the script. Instead of waiting for life to happen to you, you are already positioned for what comes next. Life stops being something you endure and becomes something you control. That is what makes anticipation feel like knowing the future. Toxic people panic when they realize they cannot shake you anymore. They raise their voice, and you do not flinch. They throw silence, and you stay steady. They plot behind your back, and you are already 2 steps ahead. That is why they call it scary. It is not that you can see the future. It is that you are no longer controlled by their behavior. When you anticipate, their tricks feel recycled. Their words sound hollow. Their power feels fake. This forces them to face themselves, and that is what they fear most. Your calm becomes their mirror. Your foresight becomes their humiliation. They thought they were clever, but you turned their game into a pattern too obvious to ignore. Think of how much stronger you feel when nothing catches you off guard. The friend who talks behind your back no longer stings, because you anticipated it from their jealousy. The partner who cheats no longer shatters you, because you anticipated it from their lack of discipline. The family member who downplays your dreams no longer silences you, because you anticipated it from their bitterness. By anticipating, you remove their ability to dictate your emotions. You stop living in shock and start living in control. They cannot break someone who already knows their next move. And once you reach this point, you become someone others cannot play with. You become someone feared, not because you hurt others, but because you cannot be hurt by the same tricks anymore. Anticipation also means you trust yourself again. When you ignore red flags, you betray yourself. When you anticipate, you honor yourself. You tell yourself, I see what is coming, and I am ready. That readiness restores self-respect. You no longer need to chase answers from people who gave you lies. You no longer beg for closure from people who only gave you wounds. You close the chapter yourself because you anticipated the ending. That is the real strength. You stop being surprised by their exit and start being proud of your ability to walk forward. You no longer bleed in silence. You rise in silence, and that silence is louder than any scream. The beauty of anticipation is that it makes you free. You stop expecting loyalty from the disloyal. You stop expecting kindness from the cruel. You stop expecting consistency from the unstable. Instead, you invest in yourself, because you know where their road leads. This does not make you bitter. It makes you wise. You still love, but you love with clarity. You still trust, but you trust with awareness. You still forgive, but you forgive with boundaries. They hate this version of you because it cannot be fooled. They cannot walk back into your life with the same empty promises. You anticipated the cycle, and you ended it. That is freedom. When people say it feels like you already know the future, they misunderstand. You are not seeing visions. You are simply paying attention. People repeat themselves. They reveal their truth over and over again. The only difference is that you are finally watching with open eyes. That is anticipation. That is survival. And once you live this way, no betrayal can collapse you. No toxic person can own you. No heartbreak can define you. You are no longer at the mercy of what they do. You are in control of how you respond. That is what makes anticipation frightening to others. It shows them that no matter what game they play, you already prepared your win. People reveal more than they intend through their scars, not their speeches. You notice it in the way they flinch when certain topics arise, or how they overreact to the smallest triggers. They may speak of strength, but their tone cracks when old pain leaks out. Their words promise change, but their wounds always guide them back to the same habits. You see the cycle because you watch without illusion. They lie, yet their wounds scream louder than the script they perform. They claim peace, but their restlessness betrays them. This is how you anticipate their moves. You do not listen to the words, they are camouflage. You watch for the wound that repeats itself like an echo. That is where the truth lies, and that is where their future decisions are hiding in plain sight. Every betrayal you've experienced carried a wound at its root. Someone who abandoned you had already tasted abandonment themselves. Someone who lied to you grew up knowing deception as survival. Someone who tried to control you was once powerless and feared losing grip again. You begin to understand that people are ruled less by will and more by scars they never healed. This realization makes them predictable, not because you are gifted with foresight, but because you dare to see beneath the mask. They may try to play strong, but the wound always bleeds through. You read that bleeding before they even feel the cut, and that terrifies them. You move like a shadow that already knows where they will stumble. Think of the partner who cheats and begs forgiveness. They promise they will change, but their wound whispers louder than their vows. They fear emptiness, they chase validation, they crave the feeling of being wanted. Words cannot silence that wound. It repeats itself until they either heal or destroy what they touch. You see through the promises because you recognize the wound is still open. That awareness stops you from being shocked when the cycle continues. You no longer take betrayal personally. You see it as the wound speaking louder than the person. This is the advantage of observation. You stop reacting to lies and start anticipating the repetition. They are not mysterious. They are rehearsing their pain through you. Toxic people often cloak themselves in confidence, but confidence without healing is fragile. Watch closely and you see how easily it shatters when the wound is pressed. They act superior, but their rage ignites when they feel ignored. They act generous, but jealousy poisons them when you shine brighter. They act kind, but bitterness spills when their old insecurities are touched. You stop believing the mask when you start paying attention to these fractures. Their entire identity becomes predictable when you see the wound directing their performance. You stop being the victim of their rage because you anticipated it. You stop taking their jealousy as surprise because you already expected it. The wound always leaks, and you make no mistake in seeing it. What they call your intuition is simply your patience with details. You notice the way someone avoids eye contact when trust is discussed. You remember how their voice rises when they'd feel cornered. You see how they need control whenever they feel powerless. Each wound leaves fingerprints on behavior. The repetition is loud, and yet most people refuse to hear it. You chose to listen. That is why you look like a prophet to those still blind. You are not reading the stars. You are reading their scars. They may deny it, but they cannot escape it. Their wound has become their pattern, and patterns always betray the actor before the mask falls. You are feared because you see what others run from. People don't want their wounds noticed. They want their words believed. They want the show applauded, not the pain exposed. Yet your silence, your stare, your refusal to be deceived by repetition, this unsettles them. They realize their performances cannot protect them from your vision. You stand calm while they unravel in their own script. You know what they will say before they say it? Because their wound already told you. This is why anticipation feels supernatural. You are simply a witness who pays attention without flinching. Life becomes less chaotic when you stop believing words and start hearing wounds. A toxic friend doesn't hate you. They hate the reflection of themselves they see in your growth. A jealous sibling doesn't wish you harm. They wish they had healed their own failures. A partner who sabotages love doesn't despise intimacy. They fear it because their past taught them closeness means pain. Their wounds scream through every move. Once you hear it, you stop asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and start answering, "They are repeating what they never resolved." This clarity removes confusion, and with it, removes your suffering. Their cycle no longer chains you. Anticipating wounds is not about control, it is about survival. You no longer beg liars to be honest, because you know their wound thrives in deception. You no longer chase the absent, because you know their wound thrives in escape. You no longer seek fairness from the envious, because you know their wound thrives in resentment. Instead, you step aside, already prepared for their collapse. Your detachment becomes your weapon. They cannot shake you when you already knew where they would fall. This distance makes you untouchable. They may scream, but you do not react. They may betray, but you do not break. You already accounted for it because the wound was louder than the vow. What terrifies them most is your composure. They expect shock, they expect chaos, they expect tears. Instead, they find you still. They find you calm, as though you knew the ending before the story began. And in truth, you did. The wound gave you the script. They are only actors repeating their role, but you refuse to sit in the audience anymore. You watch the cycle without becoming part of it. That silence is what cuts deepest. They cannot control you if you already read their future in their scars. They wanted to wound you, but you turned their wound into your shield. They always thought they could move you like a pawn. That is the pride of manipulators. They believe their strategy is invisible. They think you are blind to the subtle shifts, the emotional traps, the guilt they sprinkle like breadcrumbs. At first, you fell into their games, and they fed on that power. They convinced themselves they were the master, pulling strings you never saw. Yet, while they celebrated their illusion of control, you were learning the rhythm of their board. You studied the moves, the repeated tricks, the predictable patterns. Then one day, the illusion cracked. They believed they were grandmasters, but you realized they were playing the same tired openings. Their entire empire of control depended on you never noticing the board itself. Once you understood the rules, their dominance dissolved. The truth about manipulators is that they never invent new moves. They recycle. They guilt trip the same way. They raise their voice the same way. They disappear the same way. They return the same way. The pieces never change, the board never shifts. That is why anticipation destroys them. You know the queen they will use as guilt. You know the knight they will send in as charm. You know the rook they lean on as silence. Once you name the pieces, you strip their mystery. What they call genius is nothing but repetition. You are not afraid of the repetition anymore. You see the shape of their game before they even touch a piece. You are not a pawn. You are not even their opponent. You are the one who designed the table they are sitting at. That realization shatters their pride more than anything. Manipulators thrive when people are distracted by emotions. They win because you react instead of observing. You once gave them that advantage. You rush to explain yourself, to defend yourself, to fix the piece. That was the role of a pawn, moving one square at a time, obeying their direction. But when you chose stillness, when you stopped rushing to respond, their board collapsed. They relied on your movement, not their own skill. When you stayed silent, their plan unraveled. They pressed the same buttons, but the machine no longer responded. That is how the game flipped. The one they thought they controlled stopped moving, and suddenly the manipulator looked foolish. They panicked, realizing their power depended on your willingness to dance to their rhythm. To beat a manipulator, you do not need more tricks. You need clarity. You stop being seduced by their speeches and start listening to their patterns. Words are their camouflage, but actions are their confession. Every time they disappear after a fight, they teach you their strategy. Every time they deny responsibility, they reveal their fear. Every time they charm after betrayal, they show you their dependency. These are not mysteries, these are moves on the board. You memorize them until the game becomes predictable. Then you move with precision. Not out of emotion, but out of understanding. They swing wildly, you stay patient. They plot loudly, you watch quietly. Eventually, they checkmate themselves, and all you did was let their own moves betray them. That is the art of truly mastering the board. What truly frightens manipulators is your refusal to react. Their board has no power without reaction. They insult, but you do not answer. They guilt, but you do not apologize. They disappear, but you do not chase. Suddenly, their strategies look small. Their supposed chess game becomes tic-tac-toe, predictable and childish. The silence you bring feels like checkmate. They cannot believe their old tricks no longer work, and panic spreads in their eyes. That is the moment of reversal. The moment they realize the one they underestimated has been studying every move with ruthless patience. You are not outsmarting them. You are exposing them. Nothing terrifies a manipulator more than exposure. There is beauty in realizing you do not need to fight them directly. The manipulator always expects resistance, because resistance is still part of the game. But you step outside the board entirely. You refuse to play by their script. You stop giving explanations. You stop defending your name. You stop pleading for peace. Instead, you let their own moves consume them. They wanted you as a pawn, but pawns that refuse to move destroy the game. They are left pacing the board, repeating the same stale strategies, while you are already outside the room building a life beyond their reach. They do not lose because you crushed them. They lose because you stopped feeding their illusion. Think about the strength it takes to see the board clearly. Most people cannot. They are blinded by love, by loyalty, by hope that the manipulator will change. That blindness is the manipulator's shield. But you have torn that shield apart. You see the cycles for what they are. You know they will twist words when cornered. You know they will play victim when challenged. You know they will charm when they feel you slip in a way. These are not surprises. They are the only moves they know. That is why you look powerful. It is not magic, it is attention sharpened into wisdom. You finally stop being shocked. They can no longer catch you off guard. And that is how you win. The board is a mirror. Manipulators reveal themselves in their obsession with control. They think you will never notice their desperation, but desperation leaks. You catch the tremor in their voice when their tricks fail. You see the panic in their silence when you no longer chase. You notice the cracks in their confidence when your calm does not bend. These cracks become your strategy. You let them show their hand. You let them exhaust their arsenal. When the last piece is played, they collapse under their own need for control. They thought they could play you, but they were only playing themselves. You simply waited for the game to eat them alive. You are not cruel for seeing the board. You are awake. Manipulators will call you heartless for refusing to be tricked. They will call you arrogant for refusing to react. They will call you distant for refusing to chase. Those are the cries of someone losing their grip. Do not mistake their noise for truth. Their words are the smoke. Their wounds are the fire. You have learned to see through smoke. That is why you will never bow to their game again. You anticipated the board, and in doing so, you destroyed the illusion they built their entire power on. They will move pieces until the end, but you already know the outcome. That is checkmate without effort. Fear leaves fingerprints on every decision, and desire leaves trails of fire behind every excuse. You do not need to be a prophet to see where someone is headed. You only need to watch what they fear most and what they crave most. They fear being alone, so they cling too tightly. They desire recognition, so they exaggerate their worth. They fear rejection, so they betray before being betrayed. They desire power, so they mask cruelty as confidence. Once you understand the balance of fear and desire, you read people like a script already written. Their actions may look random to others, but to you, they are rehearsed. They never escape their own patterns, and that predictability becomes your shield. You anticipate not through magic, but through merciless attention. They spend their lives trying to hide their fear, yet in doing so, they reveal it louder. The person who laughs too hard at insults fears being seen as fragile. The one who always dominates the conversation fears invisibility. The one who mocks your ambition fears their own wasted time. Their disguise is their confession. And desire plays the same role. What they chase reveals where they are broken. The man obsessed with conquest fears being forgotten. The woman who sabotages love fears being powerless. The friend who cannot celebrate your success fears being insignificant. They do not know how transparent they are. They think their words hide them, but their patterns betray them every time. When you understand fear and desire, you walk into rooms already knowing who will attack, who will collapse, and who will betray. Fear is the leash manipulators wear, even when they pretend to be wolves. Watch closely, and you will see how fear steers them more than strategy. They lash out not because they are strong, but because they fear silence exposing them. They control others not because they are confident, but because they fear being irrelevant. They cling to you not because you are everything to them, but because they fear being nothing without you. Fear chains them, and desire drags them forward. They become predictable because they cannot resist the pull or escape the leash. You see the leash before they do, and that makes you dangerous. While they live as slaves to urges, you stand free, reading their cycles before they know they are trapped inside them. Every betrayal you faced was born from this cycle. They desired control and feared your independence. They desired approval and feared your silence. They desired freedom and feared responsibility. These conflicting forces tore through them and spilled out as betrayal. At the time, you called it unexpected, but now you see it clearly. It was not unexpected. It was inevitable. Their fear and their desire were louder than any promise they could make. This realization frees you from confusion. You stop asking why. You stop searching for prophecy. You start watching the patterns of fear and desire, and suddenly the world feels less chaotic. You do not need to wonder if they will hurt you again. Their wounds already wrote the ending. What terrifies people most is when you see this truth and do not flinch. They wanted you reactive. They wanted you pleading for answers. Instead, you stand calm, as though you already knew their next move. In reality, you did. You saw their fear before they admitted it. You heard their desire before they confessed it. That is why your silence cuts deeper than words. They thought they had the power of mystery, but you stripped it away. They are no longer dangerous to you, because they are no longer unknown. Their patterns make them small. Their smallness makes you steady. The steadiness unsettles them more than any revenge could. The beauty of this perspective is that you stop being surprised by cruelty.